a lot of big companies are having, they pay for the tools, they roll it out to everybody, and then it's like crickets. No one's really using it, or, some people are using it like a search engine. And so the adoption is really the problem. So I work closely with people to do obsolete, to do strategy, like I mentioned. So I interview everybody, understand their workflows, kind of like a bit of a forward deployed engineer kind of, and then working with teams, going from like training, like I do workshop series. So starting with basics, what are prompting. Some people are all over the spectrum as far as like the AI literacy. So you don't want to leave people out by jumping ahead to Claude Code, but so I think the strategy plus the phased rollout, I think is the best way to get your full team up to speed in 60 days, a 60-day rollout plan.
You're listening to 0 to 1, the podcast where future unicorns get a start. Every week, we sit down with the founders actually building, the ones turning scrappy ideas into real-world companies. No fluff, no cliches, just raw insights, hard lessons, and the playbooks that VCs and top operators don't share publicly. We're your hosts, Jonathan, Matteo, and Gary, three friends obsessed with turning 0 into 1. Ready to build something legendary? Let's dive in.
So joining us on 0 to 1 today is Nicole Patten, a former Google UX engineer who spent 7 years building internal research tools. She left in 2025 to found Elevate Online and Claude Training, helping founders and team actually adopt Claude, not just pay for it. In this episode, Nicole breaks down what most people get wrong about Claude, what a business that fully runs on it actually looks like, and the concrete moves founders and operator can make to get real leverage from it, whether they are building solo or with a team. Hello, Nicole. How are you? It's great to have you on 0 to 1 today.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
But before that, maybe could you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and also what drove you to leave Google in 25 to go all in on cloud adoption?
Yeah, definitely. So I've had a long journey. I actually went to university for neuroscience and was formally trained as a neuroscientist. I moved to New York and I actually got into coding and web development about 15 years ago by I taught myself. I found a neuroscientist who needed a website and I figured I could figure it out with Stack Overflow. So taught myself coding about 15 years ago. Then started working for startup, working for an ed tech company that ended up getting acquired by Google. So yeah, then I started working at Google, which, great place to work. Was there for 7 years, a UX engineer, as you mentioned. So similar to a creative technologist. So coming up with creative solutions for designers or product managers or small teams is kind of like working in a little startup. Prototyping, and then as you mentioned, building internal tools for user researchers. And then there's been a lot of change in the world in the past couple of years, as you know, especially for software engineers. So Google was going through a lot of changes, with AI, and then after COVID. So I wanted to take the leap and become an entrepreneur. Even though I, worked for Google, I used Gemini quite a bit and all the other ones, all the tools out there, ChatGPT, obviously, Grok. But I just really gravitated towards Claude. I really found that the product was like far superior. The outputs I was getting were far superior. Projects, skills, like new features kept coming out. The ethics behind Claude and how, Dario, how they kind of split from ChatGPT. And so, that all really resonated with me. So I decided to go in doing Claude training because people just kept asking me, will you teach me Claude? My team just bought Claude. Like, how do I learn Claude? What is a project? So started a business doing that on claudetraining.com. And now I train huge multi-billion-dollar teams. So it's really exciting.
You mentioned you have a background in neuroscience and spent after that 7 years at Google building products. So very curious how this combination shaped the way you think about building products, and maybe also today, like when you do Claude training, like how does it shape the way you work basically?
So that's a great question. So as a, neuroscientist, I was very, following scientific rigor. So, scientific method, understanding how people think, how people operate really. And I think that really played a role in how I create products, understanding the problem before presenting a solution. So really trying to like understand what people, where the actual problem is, because sometimes people will say, "Oh, I'm having a problem with this. I think this is the solution." But then you dig deeper and you ask more questions and you find out that it's actually a different problem. So I think that really helped shaped how I build products. And also, I think it also helped that combined with the rigor of working at Google really helped define how I create a business. So, very organized, very like lean deep into questions and problems before presenting a solution. Yeah, I think the combination of both Google and the neuroscience really helped me to create a very lean business. So, yeah.
Super interesting. I'm sure we'll get into it later. But I know you recently ran a Claude Code hackathon at the New York Tech Week.
Hmm.
100 people in the room with
Yeah.
more than 700 people on the wait list, which tells a lot. According to you, where are we in the Claude adoption curve right now? And where do you think it's going next?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, really interesting. I mean, the New York Tech event was great. As you said, yeah, there were 100 people in the room. It was a hackathon, but kind of like workshop style. What I'm realizing is that people, I'll do usually an intake or surveys, ask what everyone's AI literacy is. People will often definitely overestimate their AI literacy. So people will say, "Oh, I'm a 6 or a 7 on an AI. I use AI every day. Oh, yeah, I know." And then, we start building or we start training and questions come up that are, more like, well, how do I write a prompt, or like, what is a project? So I think that, well, the technology is moving really, really fast. And I think the AI literacy is way behind. I think people want to get up to date and they want to use AI in a really productive way. But I'd say 99% of people I talk to are still using it like a search engine, kind of afraid to prompt and like very particular with their prompts, very worried about, tokens. There's so much hype around token usage and then hype around data leakage and hallucinations. And so I think all this hype is actually preventing people from moving forward with actually learning and like learning by building. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm noticing.
And according to you, where does this fear come from? Is it because as an engineer, I was trained to like test new technology and figure out the risk later.
Hmm.
And about the audience, the people you talk to, what is the number one thing that causes them to really like be careful about trying and experimenting with the tools?
I think it's twofold. I think the fear comes from social media and hype. And I think there's a lot of fear around, yeah, just the hallucinations. Oh, I've read online or I've seen it in social media posts that, it's gonna give me wrong information or, all of that. Or there's a lot of people out there saying that, oh, if you use AI, you're mediocre, your work is mediocre. I see a lot of this like viral stuff going around, a lot of clickbait. So I think just like social media plays a real part in the fear aspect. And then I see businesses very worried about their data leakage. And then also just you see stories where people are like, oh, my company, oh, Uber, or, whoever, like burned through millions of dollars in tokens or something. So people are really afraid of that too. They don't want to play around, move fast and break things and try new stuff and then have a $2,000 bill the next day. So I think that's a lot of the fear that I'm seeing. But I think a lot of the lack of adoption just comes from people not having time or not getting into the mental model or changing their way of thinking to use AI.
Okay, cool. And going back to what you were saying just before, again, like regarding AI adoption, I think like right now, most people maybe already touched Claude already and tried a few things on it. But as you mentioned, I think most people are not really using it the right way. So
Right.
what would you say is the one thing people fundamentally like misunderstand about Claude, and like once they get it, like it can get like just 10x better what they get out of it. Like
Yeah, absolutely. I think just like the fundamentals of building memory, so creating a project. A lot of people, I see them just doing one-shot prompts and different threads, and they're just confusing the AI. And I think just getting a baseline understanding of how to create a project, what to put in the project instructions, what to put in the global instructions, how skills are different from projects, how to prompt correctly, how to tell it what you want, what the output should be. So I think just the fundamentals is what I would tell people. The fundamentals, and just start using it. Use it all the time. Train it. Tell it to get to know you every morning. Do a check-in. So
Okay, cool. And maybe because I'm sure like a lot of our listeners like will get to this episode because they want to understand Claude better, but they might not at this time. So not to get a free course, but can you just go back to a few concepts like for like skills, MCPs, connectors, like basically what
Mhm.
are the main concept of Claude Code that people mainly like see a lot in maybe on LinkedIn, pretending they understand, but actually never manage to.
Yeah, well, so you just mentioned Claude Code. So since Claude Code, Claude Cowork, Claude AI are different, I think that's one thing that people don't realize. But would you say one thing that people don't realize with Claude Code, or any of them?
I think any of them, but you're right that Claude Code is even more like misunderstood as it's a
Yeah.
bit more technical. Like you need to go on the terminal basically. So it's like for a lot of people, it's already enough to, like stop
hmm
them from understanding it. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I tell everybody to start with Claude AI. It's your thought partner. Start strategizing, creating skills, connecting the NCPs, because once you do that there, that carries over into Cowork, where you can do scheduled tasks, and then also into Cloud Code, so you can use the MCPs, the connectors. So you want to have all your tools built. So I think that, yeah, just those fundamentals, and then once you get into Cloud Code, then that unlocks so much. You have all your data just at your fingertips. You can say, build me a dashboard of like my financial dashboard, and then it just becomes fun, I think, once you start playing around with it.
yeah, very cool. And regarding Claude Code now, like what do you see is the right frontier to say like, okay, I'm not technical, but I will use Claude Code and generate my own website dashboard or CRM or whatever you want. And okay, I'm not technical. I should get like a tech team. Like, what is the frontier? Because a lot of people get confused. Like they feel like, okay, I will fire all my
Mhm.
developers and do everything on my by myself. But what is the right frontier?
Well, I would say that founders and, very small business owners, solopreneurs have an unfair advantage right now with Claude Code. They can actually go and build anything. So it's just kind of up to them. Technology is no longer the bottleneck. It's knowing what you want to build and then creating a plan for that. I think solopreneurs and founders and very small business owners have a huge advantage right now with Claude Code. You used to have to pay tons of money for a developer or a SaaS product. Now you can build whatever you want. Now the barrier is no longer technology, it's knowing what to build, what you want to build, and being able to articulate that in a way that LLMs can understand to actually bring your design to life. But really, I think solopreneurs just can fly these days. I own a business and I have no employees, no contractors, and making over 30K a month at the moment. So yeah, technology is no longer the bottleneck. It's just really putting like a PRD together, knowing what to build.
Super interesting. And I read that your business was 100% run on cloud, if I'm not
hmm
wrong,
Yeah.
as you mentioned. What made you want to do that, and how does it look like from like, I don't know, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to automate all my business. What do I need to think about? And I'm sure there are some workflows that are very hard to automate. And so what would
hmm
be your advice on?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I run my entire business with Claude, so zero employees. And it really just started out with a project and then starting to create skills, a check-in skill. It really just flipping the mental model of who should I hire to what should I automate. I think maybe a year or two ago, people were like, I'm scaling my business by hiring 10 more people. These days, I think that's no longer the flex. The flex is more like, I'm making all this money on just me. I'm orchestrating all of these agents and scheduled tasks and, everything from marketing to sales to strategy, email follow-up, all of that, scope of work generation. So even like finances, I don't even have a bookkeeper anymore. So I think it's just switching the mental model of, oh, I want to hire someone, to how can I build this myself? And it's like a slow iterative process, but I'm constantly building on my team. But yeah, I think just switching the mental model to who can I hire to what can I automate next?
And like, do you like, is Claude enough for what you're describing, or do you actually need like other tool to actually like, do like workflow automation, connect to the different system? Like, is Claude an agent so enough to automate everything you do?
It is, yeah. So I used to use N8N and Zapier, but now I've switched everything to Claude Code. So I have one large mono repo. I call it my Elevate infra. And that's what I build upon. I use like a orchestration, directives execution system that I learned from Nick Sarev's YouTube videos. He's a great content creator. And I just started with one or two workflows, and now I have, close to 100. I have 10 different dashboards for every piece of my business. And I do use the connectors. So everything, if you have an MCP, great. If not, you can use the API with Claude Code. But yeah, everything just runs through Claude.
You mentioned a lot of technical terms,
Mhm.
so maybe we can like dive deeper on that. I know you agents, skills, MCPs, and for our audience, who like are not fully aware of what those are, could you maybe provide a brief explanation and also introduce maybe say a few words about like when to leverage each for what kind of task, so that they can have a broader picture of like how their their business can be automated with each of those components?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody's talking about agents. They're, the thing these days, they're the hot topic. But I think starting smaller, and I think keeping a human in the loop. Because an agent, it runs autonomously. And I want to have my eyes on everything that's going out to my clients or my website or my social media until, I see Claude's doing a good enough job to kind of give it the green light. But I still like to review everything. So more than agents, I use more workflows and scheduled tasks. So one example is a workflow that searches the web every day for topics, like trending topics about Claude. Anytime anyone posts a new workflow that might be interesting, or anytime anything changes on the Anthropic blog or their website, I'm the first to find out. So I get a text message, and that's how I stay up to date as a consultant. Not necessarily an agent, but it's a workflow that's kind of constantly monitoring for triggers from certain websites. And then it's also running on, every 6 hours. So any interesting workflows, as I mentioned. So most of what I have running is more of a scheduled task. So reconciling my invoices and my expenses on a weekly basis, stuff like that. So my system is actually mostly workflows, since I want to have a human in the loop for everything. So mostly scheduled tasks. So I have scheduled tasks for, my finances, my invoices, my Stripe payments. Gives me a good strategic picture of where my money's coming from, where what's working and what's not on my website. So I have everything kind of working together, but it started with one small bill, and then I started to build off of that. So every time I have a new idea, I talk to Claude, and then we implement that using the Claude MD as kind of like an orchestration system. But yeah, I think it's really just to start something like I have like a dashboard, like an infrastructure, kind of like planning out what you would want to build. Like, okay, finances, what would I want to see? Like, what tools am I using? Marketing, what do I want to pull in? Google Analytics, ConvertKit, et cetera. All of that. So kind of like planning it out and then kind of just building off of it.
So Claude.md for our audience is basically like a file you create that contains instructions on how you want the task to be executed, like what kind
Mhm.
of task and how would that work. And then on top of it, there is a skill section that calls those like MD files to execute the task. Is that correct?
So yeah. So the Claude MD file, you can have Claude write it. I always suggest having Claude write everything. So what I usually do, my workflow is when I start a new repo, I describe what I want, and then, I describe in very deep detail. It's like a mini product requirements doc, if you will. And then after working with Claude a bit, then I will run, there's a slash command. So there's slash commands in Claude Code. So /, and then it'll drop down and show you all the slash commands. They're very similar to skills, almost identical. But if you trigger it with init, that will create the Claude MD file. And so instead of the Claude MD file being referenced, the Claude MD is the orchestrator. So it'll say, this is all the tools that we have in our toolbox, and then it'll pick which one to fire. And then these other tools are more like the directives. So if you have a directives file that has like your marketing watcher and your invoice reconciler. So anytime you like have a prompt, it'll look at the Claude MD, and you want to keep that really lean because it does take up your context window. And then it will look for what files to the directive, which gives it more info. And then it will look at the execution, which is the actual Python scripts that run. That's just a breakdown of the system that I use that was adopted from Nixarev, as I mentioned.
Okay, very interesting. And so does it mean that people that actually want to get the most out of Claude and create workflow as you do need to know how to deploy online, or they can do everything on Claude?
It depends if you want other people to be using it as well. So what I'm mentioning, my Elevate infra, it's checked into GitHub. So GitHub is very important for anyone doing any sort of Claude code or vibe coding, because if you lose your files, you want to have a backup. You want to see a version control of what has happened. So you can easily connect that to something like Vercel, but I keep mine local because since I'm a team of one, I don't need anybody else looking at my marketing stuff. And a lot of the agents, they run on GitHub Actions. So that's basically like a cron job. So I mentioned I have like the finance reconciling piece and like the marketing piece and like the scout that searches the web for competitive analysis and all of that. And so those run on GitHub Actions. So you don't really need to know how to deploy it, but it's really easy if you want to. You can use a tool like Netlify or Vercel, and it's basically just one click to connect your GitHub. So basically everyone can be a developer now.
No, I'm sure we all can do, not unlike before, where it was very like
Mm-hmm.
abstract. So it's amazing that we have Claude Code today. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe to, to wrap up on this point, personally, I find that skills are more than enough to do, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
tasks rather
Yeah.
than building complex agents. Would you
Mm-hmm.
agree on that, or would you maybe recommend our audience, to always think always think agents first, rather than building skills or vice versa?
I definitely suggest starting with skills and workflows. So I have a few simple skills. I have several different brands and websites. So a skill like an SEO audit, or a skill is like a competitive analysis. And then once you have the skill and you can, as I output this as a Google Doc, or, then you can run it on the GitHub action, as I mentioned. So imagine like a skill that's auditing your website copy, your for SEO and your competitor analysis. And then so you can, I'd say, start small and then you can build into an agent. So I'm testing a new agent now that will look at my website copy, look at what people are clicking on my website copy, look at the competitor analysis, and then make its own changes to my website. And so it's constantly learning from itself in memory. But it makes me a little nervous, having just like the agents fully autonomous. I don't want to check my website and oh no, what happened? But yeah, so I always say start small, start with the skills, start with workflows, start scheduling, and then you can move on to agent.
Especially when it has access to Stripe. I'm sure you don't want
Yeah.
to full autonomy.
Yeah. Exactly.
But no, like super interesting, and especially around the point around the self-improving aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a bit like, I don't know, like our listeners might not be familiar with the self-improving loop feedback that is integrated within Claude. Can you maybe tell us more about it, and how to really like trigger it so that our like agents or project get smarter over time?
Yeah, definitely. And So I mentioned iteration on skills and workflows and everything is really key. But imagine if it could iterate on itself. So you didn't have to spend that time, you know, doing that. So basically giving an agent or, a skill access to memory. So maybe it like will log every time it does an SEO audit, and then it will look at all those logs and then like kind of build off of that. That's like a very simple way of like self-learning, teaching a skill to learn from itself. And you can even do that at the Claude AI level.
Okay, and like you were talking about like having a human in the loop, and obviously like that is something that is I believe important because I think a lot of people are not using AI because they're afraid that they will lose their decision power, and they're not thinking about this kind of solution where they can have an AI in the loop. How would you like basically would you help people to better understand like what is the right architecture in like whatever what they want to build with what they want to build, like human in the loop or actually completely automate it?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people come to me and ask, how do I get Claude to write my emails for me? And that's something I don't necessarily advocate for. And actually, Claude doesn't either. So it does not have the ability by design to send an email for you. It'll draft an email. It'll look at your sent emails and your incoming emails, and it has its own memory, and it'll draft an email for you and put it in your drafts, but it won't send it. And I appreciate that because I don't want a client coming to me mad because Claude said something that I didn't mean. So most of the time, 99% of the time, those drafts, I have Claude draft all my emails on Sunday night, like anything that I missed, needed to follow up. So I can come in Monday morning and review and hit send. And I prefer that human in the loop. Maybe one day in maybe not that long, but maybe you'll trust Claude enough that like this is exactly what I write every time. You get to the point where you're not even editing it, then maybe you can run it on autopilot. But I just really like to know, if something is going out to a client or, is from me, then I need my eyes on it before I approve it. I need a human to approve it.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about like individual people like using Claude to help them with their email, with their help like make their life easier. But let's maybe talk about companies because I think this is also interesting, and I think the
Yeah.
usage and the use cases will be different also. So, like, what difference do you see, and do you believe that always also for companies like Claude should be used by itself and it's a tool that is self-sufficient, or do you believe that actually we do need like to have developers that develop solutions and not only rely on Claude Code for companies?
Uh, yeah, so I see I work with a lot of big teams. I help them with strategy. A lot of them are rolling out teams or enterprise Claude, and they want to understand, what skills and projects should be at the global level, what should they automate with Cowork, what should they how best to collaborate. But I think at the root of everything, everybody kind of has a lot of the similar problems, like sending emails a lot of, or triaging emails. They have a lot of spam or, a ton of like, let's say emails coming in that are really low quality, like gig requests or something like that. So I see email triage as like universal across pretty much everyone I talk to, whether they're a solopreneur or they're the founder of a huge company. I also think that yeah, I think every department within a company has very similar needs. So finance has very similar needs, marketing has very similar needs. So it just happens that a solopreneur or a single person has all of those things. But I think it is similar between companies and people.
And maybe, for like large teams or small teams that wants to like collaborate on like specific cloud projects, how would
Mhm.
that work in Insight? Like let's say I'm building a skill that I want to share to my team. How should I think about it differently versus if I wanted to build a skill for my own use cases? How does it differ on that end?
Yeah. So building skills at the organizational level, I think, is really crucial to rolling out Claude to larger teams. because what I'm seeing is that some teams are rolling out Claude and people are building skills for the same thing and wondering why they're getting outputs. So I think what needs to happen at the very beginning of a huge company rolling out Claude is to sit down and map out what skills and then iterate on those skills until they're perfect, let's say, or not perfect, it won't ever be perfect, but until they're good enough to share with the team. But let's say, for example, a PRD generator or a proposal generator. You want to have your template, you want the same output every time. So anything that you want that your multiple people will use and you want them all to have the same output, I would put at the organizational level. So most skills pretty much that are crucial for the company would go at the organizational level. And then if you're in finance, and then now Claude has something for called plugins where you can also like bundle skills. So then you can think of like a plugin for finance and then a plugin for your marketing team and kind of deploy those to each team, and then everything is standardized. Everybody who jumps on the team, a new hire, and has all those skills right there, you know. And then if you have similarly like a shared project and you have a new hire, they come in, they don't have to bug you and shadow you for 2 weeks. And wait, how do I do this? How do I do this? They can just ask the Cloud project. So I think that's really where the productivity gains are.
Okay, that's cool. And what do you see like the future of AI adoption? Do you, like especially in I would say in B2B maybe like do you believe that most people will actually be using AI very well, be using Claude Code and like building with AI basically? Or do you believe that most people will rely on existing tools but not necessarily be expert in the AI itself?
Yeah, great question. I think within like 2 years, I think everybody will have a deep understanding of AI and be using it on a daily basis. I think we're not there yet, but it's rapidly accelerating. The technology is already there. The training and the mental model around using AI aren't there yet, and that's what I strive to help with. But yeah, I don't think it'll just be AI tool usage. I think it's changing the whole mental model of how you work. What you can build things yourself. You know, if you're a small team, you can be super lean and focus on the things that matter and not the overhead. If you're even let's a photographer, you want to focus on your craft and taking the pictures, but you don't want to spend all this time reconciling invoices and doing your bookkeeping or hiring a bunch of people to do it. I think companies and founders alike are going to have an AI native basically in a few years.
So do you think that a lot of AI native, like small companies, will take on the big enterprise that will move slower? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, great question. I do think that companies that are adopting AI sooner are going to move a lot faster. They're going to save a lot more money, and they're going to be a lot more productive. And once you start being more productive and your whole team starts using AI correctly, it just compounds. It just moves so much faster, and then it's just really incredible when you see how much time you've freed up, how much money you've saved. And yeah, I definitely think that those companies will move way ahead of some of the companies that are slow to adopt, or there's more bureaucracy and red tape to get AI into the company. I think even one of the probably slower to adopt is probably like government workers. So I know that there's a lot of red tape there. Lean companies can move really quick, especially when they start becoming AI fluent and AI native.
No, definitely. And I think it's like it overcomes, all the fears around like, will I be worse at thinking or, problem solving? I'm sure, the
Yeah.
like the perks are way better than like all the fears that can come with it.
Yeah.
But maybe for the more like power users of Claude, could you walk us through the agentic project you made the participants of your hackathon build during Tech Week? Because I thought it was super interesting and it's really not obvious to even think about this project, like
hmm
scraping the web. What is it concretely? And could you walk us through how, like, to implement it with Claude, simply explain
Yeah.
for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. And since the New York Tech Week went so well and we had so much interest, I am doing more of these with my partner. Harry Roper. So we started a series called Sprint to AI, and we're doing the same exact thing for the first one. But basically, there's a simple kind of workflow. So you start with like a scout that searches the web on any topic. So if you want to do competitive research, competitive analysis, like you want marketing materials, or you want content for your LinkedIn or Instagram on whatever topic you're in. Let's say you're a baker and you want to understand what are the trending topics in the bakery industry. You have we call it a scout that searches the web, and then we in the session we use fire crawl. So there's a number of different tools out there. What we do is we ask Claude to plan in Opus mode. This is what we want. Give us 3 different tools that could work for us. And then we have a scorer. So it says, gives us all the aggregation of what the scout found, and then scores everything. Like, this is the most popular. Let's say it's like a LinkedIn post or you want trending topics for social media. These are the 5 most popular. And then you want a way for it to notify you of those, or you want a way to be able to, to the delivery. So then we did 3 different things that we showed in the workshop. One, saving to a sheet. So I have a daily sheet. It shows me anytime anyone on Twitter or X mentions that, how do I learn Claude, or how do I switch from ChatGPT to Claude? And it's right there, like all of those links, and it drafts a reply for me, and I can just go and like respond. Another way is a vibe coded dashboard. So we spent some time surfacing data on a vibe coded dashboard, which was really cool. Another way, I mentioned the watcher that I have. So I get notified as soon as Fable was like they took it away, as like recently, the whole Mythos thing. I knew like immediately. I got a text on my phone. So there's a bunch of different ways to be able to know. And then also we schedule those on a task. So that's kind of the arc of the workshop.
And how did you handle, like the inputs that came into the, like the system or project? Because I think, most of the time, the output you get depends on the input.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard, especially when you scrape the web or you look for like data on the web to make sure, we can rely on them. Like, what is your method to really solve this problem?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where like the scorer comes in. So, every, morning I have the one that searches the web and pulls out like hundreds of people asking about Claude. But the scorer, which is like the next step in the workflow, looks at all those hundreds of responses and it's like, okay, these ones are garbage, and it takes the top ones. And then, so that's basically how we solve for that, because there is like a lot of stuff on the internet. But yeah, it was really interesting seeing people from all different industries, all different roles, seeing what they were interested in scraping and like their topic, and how they wanted it displayed to them. So it's really cool.
Could you share maybe like 2 or 3 examples, just out of curiosity, about the use
Yeah.
cases they came up with?
Yeah, there were a lot of people building startups that wanted kind of like market research on other similar startups in their industry. So there was a lot of competitor analysis going on. There was a few people there who were focused on real estate. So they were searching the web for like new real estate deals, so that was really interesting. I don't know much about that world, but just talking to those people was really cool, seeing what they were able to build. And then there were a lot of other people who were like looking for like VC funding, maybe searching the web for all of that. Somebody else I talked to was searching for like speaking topics. So like once a week, like looking for, new speaking gigs, podcasts, and conferences and stuff. So yeah, wide range of things.
Wow, super interesting. Real
Hmm.
estate, VC funding, speaking. I
Yeah,
mean, the list is long, and I'm sure there are so many use cases to unpack.
yeah,
I personally, like, for example, I use like a Tavily or Linkup, as a search API,
yeah.
because, they provide me with a lot of fresh content
Hmm.
on the web. Have you ever like considered using those, or would you say, they are not like super useful when like wanting to apply those use cases?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because there's a number of different things you might want to search. So if you want to search like Twitter and Reddit or something like that, you have to go get those those API keys. So in the workshop, we leave it very loose. Like, and that's why we ask Claude, here's what I want. This is my goal. This is my industry. These are the sources that I want to search. What's the best tool for me? And then we also ask Claude Code, give me the 3 best options, pros and cons, and then you can even spin up some sub agents to test all 3. But I really don't think that there's like a one size fits all for everything. It really depends on the sources and the topics and really what you want to surface, what your goal is.
And maybe one question, like to go back to like adopting AI in companies, because I believe like this is a real challenge. Like
Yeah.
obviously for people it's a challenge, but for companies it's a big one. Like, do you help companies identifying the right use cases? And if yes, what would be your advice to companies that have many people doing many different things and struggle to identify the right use case? Should they pay McKinsey to do like a 6 months audit, or like what should they do basically?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of big companies are having, they pay for the tools, they roll it out to everybody, and then it's like crickets. No one's really using it, or, some people are using it like a search engine. And so the adoption is really the problem. So what I recommend to people is to, sit the leads, the operation leads to do strategy. So I work closely with people to do ops leads to do strategy, like I mentioned. So I interview everybody, understand their workflows, kind of like a bit of a forward deployed engineer kind of. And then working with teams, going from like training, like I do workshop series. So starting with basics, what are prompting. Some people are at all over the spectrum as far as like the AI literacy. So you don't want to leave people out by jumping ahead to Claude Code, but so I think the strategy plus the phased rollout, I think is the best way to get your full team up to speed in 60 days, a 60-day rollout plan.
And how do you measure like adoption success? And maybe, like I know it can like happen sometime, but like some projects can fall apart. Would you recommend your clients to start from scratch, or to, like delete everything and or like fix the mistakes they have noticed to on their own?
With most teams I work with, they generally they start from scratch because a few people have a few random projects and there's a few skills, but nothing at the org level. So, and there's no global instructions at the org level, So most people, we start from scratch. We start with the settings and we go from there. Yeah, I think coming in with like the plan is really what helps. And then, oh yeah, your other question was how to measure the adoption. And that's huge, right? Like that's my whole goal is adoption and productivity gains. So I talk to people beforehand. We benchmark everybody's AI fluency level, what they're using AI for. And then I ask people for feedback mid sessions. And then at the end, we do a follow-up survey to see what skills people are using, like so it is some of it's subjective, yeah, qualitative, but some of it's not. Like how we can see, like Claude gives you a dashboard, so you can see who's using it the most, what skills are being used the most, like who's using Claude Code. So there is also the quantitative piece as well.
No, for sure. And I'm sure your background as a UX engineer like must help you a ton on those quality survey for sure. But I know we're running out of time. To wrap up the episode, would you have some newsletter, YouTube channels? I know you mentioned one earlier to
hmm
recommend that to our audience, and also maybe some starter projects. Any newbies will want
hmm
to.
Yeah, of course. So, two different things depending on who is listening. If you're like a founder or like a builder, or, we have the sprint to AI.com series. So, exactly like what we did at the hackathon. And we're doing new cohorts all the time. So, sometimes it's like create a dashboard with your, connect MCPs, create a dashboard with your business data. Others are Claude Basics, others are Claude Cowork. And then for teams, it's like claudetraining.com. So if you're an ops team or you're at a company and you want to roll out Claude, but you don't know exactly how, that's where people come to me, claudetraining.com. So that's what I've been running for about 6 months now, working with some really great clients, really big names. And so, yeah, those are the two places. And then both of those you can sign up for a newsletter. Yeah. I would just say, as far as Claude, just start talking to it, create a project. You can always message me on Instagram. I'm claudequeen.ai. And then for entrepreneurship, everything is changing these days. So just don't be afraid to try new things, basically.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of 0 to 1. If this gave you an idea, an edge, or the courage to build, send it to your friend, founder, or your team. Follow us, subscribe, and drop us a DM if there's someone you want to hear next. Until then, keep building, keep shipping, and go from 0 to 1.